Do you prefer listening to the sounds of the local construction site as opposed to the current pop music? Does your ideal concert involve actively dodging shards of metal whilst being blinded by white light and power tool sparks? Do you believe the Industrial Revolution and its consequences were completely worth it just due to some unlistenable music? If so, industrial might be the perfect genre for you. But what is industrial music, and how have we gotten to the point where this can be considered a musical instrument? Industrial is one of those genres where the music sounds pretty much identical to what you'd imagine when hearing the name. Early bands utilized harsh synthesizers and repetitive drum loops, with some even going full industrial mode, utilizing various tools and instruments you'd most commonly find at a construction site, and somehow making that an element of the music. Industrial is difficult to place definitive conventions on. Not only is the music extremely difficult to listen to at times, with some of the songs just sounding like two rusty transformers throwing hands within a toaster factory, it's also difficult to find anybody online who actually agrees on a concrete definition on what industrial music actually is, which in turn means at least 20% of you are going to comment your disagreement alongside a lazy insult right now in the comment section. The style of music has consistently morphed in and out of various genres throughout its time on this planet Earth, with the only constant being borderline illegal live performances and an obsession with rusty technology. Due to the genre consistently straying away from its original format, it's best to look towards the characteristics of early industrial when attempting to describe what the genre actually sounds like. During the genre's birth, industrial music was an attempt to tear down and reinvent the rock music of the past. Bands had become sick of the typical guitar, bass, drum structure of rock music, using industrial as a way to rebuild music using instrumentation and styles that weren't typically utilized in anything musical beforehand, which therefore leads to somebody using this as a musical instrument. First wave industrial is often characterized by its usage of the emerging technology of the time. The music utilized tape loops, distorting them to the point that the sound can barely even be considered audible, let alone musical. Many bands also invested heavily into the most expensive synthesizers for the time, and proceeded to create sounds that could be recreated as effectively using this machine. This was combined with repetitive, harsh machine drum loops that just continuously repeated in the background, whilst somebody attempted to test various pieces of broken construction equipment in the background. Despite the fact early industrial attempts to destroy all previous elements of music, the genre is still heavily inspired by the countercultural genres of the past, most prominently punk, with much of the genre's lyricism focusing on messages of anti-establishment, although presented in such an abstract manner that you'll never realize what the they actually mean. The genre delves further into the more degenerate side of punk through making the concert viewing experience as uncomfortable as humanly possible. This ranges from shining a ridiculously bright light directly into the eyes of the audience to actively utilizing construction drills on stage and hoping each concert attendee dodges the inevitable pieces of metal shrapnel flying around the venue. So how do we even get to this point? What is the history of industrial, and why is it so important to the development of music as a whole? Due to the fact that any musician that saw this or this as a musical instrument can be considered inspiration for later industrial music, we may need to go back a bit further than you may have originally expected to explore the predecessors of the genre. Let's take a trip all the way back to a post-World War II France. French engineer, radio host, writer and composer Pierre Schaeffer was offered a chance to essentially combine various elements of each of his career paths into one project. He would decide to focus on the music and engineering aspects, which resulted in Pierre deciding to take various sounds related to engineering and attempt to turn it into something musical. The final product was a composition that utilized early tape recorders to resample the sounds of train tracks. Although Pierre's goal was to create music, he intended to avoid all aspects of music, avoiding melody, rhythm, and even music theory in an attempt to rebuild music from the ground up with completely different rules. The outcome is barely musical at all and sounds more akin to a toddler clanging pieces of metal together. Despite this, the piece was still incredibly innovative for the time, with the sound manipulation on the composition requiring rooms full of various machinery and equipment to complete. Although this music doesn't sound akin to later industrial, the progression of technology and and its ability to assist in the creation of music essentially allowed for the possibility of later industrial music. Whilst we're on the topic of technology developing at a rapid rate, you are currently watching an animated goblin on a screen, and I bet you still have a crusty old wallet to store your hard-earned cash. Surely there's another way, and that brings us to the sponsor of this video, Exter. Have you ever tried purchasing an item from your local goblin supplier and you drop all of your special ancient coins?
Oh no, I have dropped my ancient big golden coin.
Luckily, with an Exter wallet, all it takes is one press of a button and your cards pop out in a safe, convenient manner. Not to mention, the wallet has an extremely pleasant, sleek design that fits perfectly in your pocket. The wallet even has built-in RFID protection to protect you against scammers. Perhaps you're a silly Billy and you lose your wallet. Luckily, Exter even has you covered there with their Finder card. This credit card sized tracker connects directly to your phone, allowing you to locate your wallet on a map at all times. Use code COOLIA or click the link in the description for up to 40% off anything on the website, which is an incredible deal. Let's get back to the video. So we've covered music's first flurry into power tool themed degeneracy. How did industrial actually become an official genre of music with various artists as opposed to just one schizophrenic, train-obsessed Frenchman? The genre would begin to develop throughout the 60s psychedelic scene, with bands like Chromagon utilizing radio wave static and resampled orchestra recordings to create an abrasive version of psychedelic rock, sounding more akin to later industrial than the music of a whacked-out hippie actively yamming down on his guitar strings. That brings us directly to who are considered by many as the pioneers of industrial music, Throbbing Gristle. The band would form in 1976, evolving from the art collective COUM Transmissions. COUM was originally a psychedelic rock band, although they began describing their work as performance art so they could receive fat stacks of cash through grants from the Arts Council of Great Britain. Various members of the group would decide to build a makeshift recording studio and began the production and performance of what they referred to as music. It would be the performance aspect of their work that originally brought attention to Throbbing Gristle, with live concerts frequently involving the audience getting visually harassed with imagery that would get me instantaneously nuked off of YouTube if shown. The music itself involved the band playing pre-recorded tape samples through a large effects unit, producing a distinctive, although highly distorted sound, which was often accompanied by schizophrenic poetry readings. This somehow resonated with a large group of people, and after receiving demand to do so, the band would begin releasing a few physical copies of their projects, including singles and live recordings. Their debut studio album, 20 Jazz Funk Greats, is considered to be their most influential, with the band spending endless amounts of money on the most up-to-date electronic music equipment, only to make alternate reality elevator music. The band would break up in 1981, claiming that their mission was complete. Although the band was short-lived, their experimentation and pioneering usage of electronic music equipment influenced countless individuals. They had even coined the term industrial as a way to describe the music and art on their record label, resulting in various other artists becoming inspired by whatever the f*** this is. Another key player in the early development of industrial would be Kraftwerk, with their 1974 album Autobahn, which introduced elements of heavy machinery and technology into their music. All this would go on to inspire various bands within the early industrial scene. Bands like Cabaret Voltaire and Einstürzen der Neubauten would push forward the musical capabilities of industrial music. The latter would even go as far as creating custom-built instruments out of scrap metal and utilizing these alongside various construction tools during live shows. They would continuously cause riots at their shows, with one incident involving a band member quite literally drilling a massive hole in the venue floor. The band would also go to great lengths to achieve their desired sound, with various songs requiring band members to continuously punch the lead singer in the stomach to achieve the correct vocal tone. This kind of behavior would become a trend within industrial, with various bands beginning to utilize items that shouldn't be anywhere near a studio or concert venue within their songs. Australian band SPK would just continuously smash pieces of metal together on stage whilst aiming an active blowtorch towards the crowd. The music of SPK is actually less abrasive and more musical than you'd expect, considering their metal clanging live performances. They utilized elements of funk to create something much more appealing than Chinese factory accident ambience. The actions and innovative music of these artists were bound to receive negative attention at some point, and this would come to fruition throughout the 80s, with various sensationalized articles criticizing the actions of the music and the bands being published. Despite this, the genre would only build in popularity, and as bands like Coil began to push the genre towards more pop sensibilities by introducing actual melodies and hooks, the genre began to diverge into various directions. Industrial would begin to evolve into a more approachable form when the genre found its way into America. Whilst the European bands continued to experiment with various styles of dance music and distorted instrumentation, American bands stuck to the American way, crushing the sound into some form of barely edible paste, then shoving it in between two pieces of bread. By this I mean creating music that more so resembled punk and metal than the original works of Throbbing Gristle. Bands like Ministry and Orgy created glitchy, dystopian music that appealed to a wider group of people, with some music even being featured in various popular films such as RoboCop. Around the same time, industrial was continuing to spew out various subgenres inspired and influenced by different areas of music. The band Skinny Puppy would take the music into more dance-based electronic direction with pulsating drums, dark evolving samples, and vocals that sound like a homeless crackhead is harassing you for money. Although that may sound abstract and difficult to listen to, it was much more approachable than the previous albums within the genre, as it was actually intended to be music as opposed to some weird piece of performance art designed to make you extremely uncomfortable. At this point in time, industrial had evolved tremendously since the original performance art pieces achieved by Throbbing Gristle. The only feasible direction for industrial at this point would be full-on mainstream success, and it would be this motherfucker that made that possible. Originally a roadie for Ministry and opener for Skinny Puppy, Trent Reznor decided he wanted a piece of that industrial pie, forming the solo band 9 Inch Nails. Reznor would take the minimalist drum-driven approach of the earlier industrial bands and introduce a crisp although explosive production style, morphing the music into something mainstream friendly. The band's most popular release, The Downward Spiral, would utilize melodic and recognizable hooks within the songs, skyrocketing the band towards success and chart recognition. This resulted in more artists within the metal sphere utilizing aspects of industrial within their music. Specifically, Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie found great success playing a form of industrial metal. As the 90s came to a close, the idea of industrial having any form of mainstream viability slowly died out, and the genre returned to its experimental roots, slowly infecting various alternate genres of music. Perhaps the most interesting combination is industrial hip-hop, with the most influential band within the genre, Death Grips, becoming perhaps the most notorious memed-on band of this generation. Death Grips would inspire countless artists within the hip-hop scene, with perhaps the most notorious being Kanye West. Through the album Yeezus, elements of industrial had reached the heights of pop music, with the album utilizing various harsh electronic sounds alongside West's signature production style and braggadocious lyrics. Nowadays, industrial is less so a genre of music, more a style for artists to utilize and create new and inventive music. The abstract nature of many of industrial's original artists have resulted in a genre that's difficult to explore and definitively characterize. Most people immediately look towards the works of Trent and 9 Inch Nails when attempting to explore industrial, although stylistically the music differs greatly from what is considered by many to be true industrial music. I believe the abstract nature of this genre is inevitable, mainly due to the time and scenario that coincided with its creation. As the genre began to soar development, so did the sophistication of the technology that was available and utilized to create music at the time. Early bands experimented heavily with these new pieces of technology, creating songs that were vastly different from one another, although stemmed from the same attitude and goal of pushing music into places it had never been before. This seems to explain why industrial was so influential and utilized so often today. Musicians are still attempting to do the same thing. Whether it be trap or prog rock, artists will continue to utilize the forever developing nature of technology to push forwards the capabilities of what they are able to produce. And perhaps it was the earliest adopters of the industrial genre that made this possible, all because they f***ed around with various drum machines, synthesizers and power tools just so they could make a slightly different noise and slap the label of music on the top.